The OA Preamble. Overeaters Anonymous is a fellowship of individuals who, through shared experience, strength, and hope, are recovering from compulsive overeating. We welcome everyone who wants to stop eating compulsively. There are no dues or fees for members. We are self-supporting through our own contributions, neither soliciting nor accepting outside donations. OA is not affiliated with any public or private organisation, political movement, ideology, or religious doctrine. We take no position on outside issues. Our primary purpose is to abstain from compulsive eating and compulsive food behaviours and to carry the message of recovery through the 12 steps of OA to those who still suffer. How this meeting works. At this meeting, we follow a rotating format. On the second week of each month is a recovered OA speaker who will be speaking on the topic of their choosing for 30 minutes. That is this week. There will be then a follow-up Q&A segment for 15 minutes it says here, but it's actually 30 minutes, isn't it? Where fellows are welcome to ask any questions of our speaker which are related to the topic in question. The meeting will be recorded, but by audio only, and you'll see a recording sign at the top of your screen. The Q&A section of our meeting is also recorded, but we don't have other people's voices, so it's just to post your questions, please, in the chat to me. Post only to the in the chat function your question to the host, me, and we will ask a question anonymously on your behalf. Please do not do this before the Q&A segment. Seventh tradition. Before we share, it's time for our seventh tradition. Although we meet electronically, we still have Zoom meeting costs to pay, and we also give contributions to OA UK EB, which is our virtual intergroup. Please make a contribution using the PayPal or bank details which are entered into the chat now. If you are new to OA, we ask that you wait to contribute until you're sure that you want to be here. So as I said earlier, today is a speaker meeting, and we're very honoured to have Janet B with us tonight. And she is going to have so I'm going to hand over to you, Janet. Would you like me to time you for half an hour, or are you going to time yourself, or what would you like to do there?
I can time myself. Thank you.
Okay, perfect. Over to you. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Give me 2 seconds here. Okay. Hi, everyone. I'm Janet B. I've recovered from compulsive eating and bulimia. Happy to be with you. I'm like obsessed with all things British. Right now, I'm on season 13 of Call the Midwife, and I understand the next thing I have to watch is All Creatures Great and Small or something like that. And I already have a list of the shows I want to see at the West End, but I'm here with y'all virtually today. So happy to be with you. I've been in recovery for September will be, I think, 43 years. But I want to talk about today about what my life was like before, because usually when I talk, I'm talking about a step or I'm talking about a chapter in the big book. And, you know, a couple of people said they want to hear my story. And I don't think my story is all that interesting because it's probably very similar to all of y'all's story. I think how God rescued me was a bigger part of my story. So, of course, I'm going to work that in. But let's start. Um, I believe I was a compulsive eater back as far as I can remember. I remember when I was in preschool obsessing about the snacks they were serving. Now, does that mean that I was born that way, or was I already, like, by the age of 4, selfish and self-centered, right? Which our big book says is the roots of this illness. I don't know, and it doesn't really matter. All I know is that I obsessed about food and it got worse and worse. And by the time I went to my first Overeaters Anonymous meeting, I was only 15 years old, but I was already a full-blown compulsive eater. And I think I'd probably done a little bit of bulimia, but not all that much. So it was right before my 16th birthday. And I remember thinking, okay, if I get 30 days, then I can have cake on my birthday. And I was just like always scheming. And when I went to my first meeting, the way they did it was you get a sponsor, you get 30 assignments, writing assignments. The first one was write a history of your compulsive eating. I don't remember the rest. And once you get 30 days, you get a plant. You guys, I never got my plant. In 6.5 years in Overeaters Anonymous, I never got that friggin' plant. I couldn't do it. So my first 6.5, 7 years in Overeaters Anonymous were spent getting progressively worse. Now, at my first meeting, I was happy because it was like, oh, there's other people who do what I do. Like I did, there wasn't a name for it. I guess it would be like, if you have pneumonia and you're sneezing and coughing all the time and you don't know anyone else is, and then you go to a group of people and they're all sneezing and coughing. Well, that's great to have fellowship and to say, okay, here's all these people just like me. And a lot of them were like, they'd come in even after me and they'd get that plan. They'd get 30 days and get that plan. And I couldn't. In my first 7 years, I never got more than 2 weeks of abstinence. And a lot of times I couldn't even make it to lunch. I got out of college, still binging, not any better. I got out of high school, moved up to New York for college. All 4 years of college, I stayed in Overeaters Anonymous, and I got progressively worse. I started throwing up more to the point where I was throwing up to 6 times a day. I didn't do very well in school because I was just so obsessed with food. I would steal food. I would steal money for food. I would take my roommate's food and get a replacement and then eat the replacement before I could get it back. I mean, I was just like a train wreck. And I would do, I guess, what like and things that like any good psychopath does when people aren't paying enough attention to her. I would like take a razor and slash myself and say I'd been mugged or told my boyfriend I'd been raped and then told him I was pregnant and I didn't know if the baby was his or the rapist and took money to get an abortion. All of this while I was in program. Nobody in those 7 years ever sat me down and said, Janet, if you're dishonest, you may as well go away because you're not going to get one bit better. Nobody ever sat me down and said that. What they said was, write a history of your compulsive eating, assignment one, and then assignment two. Nobody said you need to have a spiritual experience, which is where page 25 of the big book describes it so beautifully, where God enters our hearts and lives in a way which is indeed miraculous and commences to accomplish for us what we could never accomplish for ourselves. Nobody did that for me. They just said, call me with what you're going to eat during the day and then stick to your food plan. It was like, admit you're powerless over food, then go out and have power over food. And now thinking back, the very nice people, most of them were nice, who I met during my first 7 years, the ones who got better, I think they were just hard eaters. Those are the people who, yes, they have a problem with food, but they can get better with structure and support and a good food plan. A food plan that would leave out their, whether you call it alcoholic food, red light food, binge food. I mean, it's like my daughter is allergic to mint. So if she doesn't want to sneeze, she just doesn't have mint. Simple, right? So I think these were people like that. They're like, oh, if I eat X, Y, and Z, I can't stop. So I won't have X, Y, and Z. And then they gave each other hugs and, chips and tokens and all that stuff. And they were fine. And I'm like, again, I'm binging. And I just remember calling my sponsor and she said, what'd you binge on? And I told her. And it wasn't enough for her to tell me it was wrong. She had to call her sponsor and have her sponsor call me and tell me, why'd you eat that? You know what it tastes like, to try to, I don't know, shame me or guilt me into it. And it just didn't work. And I was worse and worse. And then I graduated college. So 4 years later, not one bit better. Still binging, still binging, still now I'm purging. And my purging got so bad that even years after I stopped, when I was recovered, my esophagus was so loose that I had to have major surgery and get it surgically retightened. Even years after, the damage was still there. So there I was in OA and I was miserable. It's like all these people seemed to be getting it and I wasn't. And it was horrible. I was very lonely. I was 22, 23 at the time. So I was young and I was cute. And because I threw up, I wasn't grossly overweight, but even throwing up to 6 times a day, I was 30 pounds heavier than I am now. So that can give you an idea of how much food I ate. And so there I was, just binging and unable to stop. And I went to this OA convention, and I was actually eating compulsively at the convention because that's just what I did, right? It's like I would go to work and I just like I couldn't not binge at work. I just couldn't not binge. And I went to this convention. I'm eating compulsively at the convention. And so first I walk into this room and this guy stands up and, he's thin. So of course, everyone thinks whatever he says is going to be gospel truth. And he stands up and he says, I have the secret. And like everyone got so quiet and I got quiet. It's like, okay, here it comes. And he said, next time you want to eat, just don't eat. And everyone's clapping and cheering. And I'm thinking, what the hell? Like, what is this? Next time you want to, if I could not eat, I wouldn't be at this convention. I wouldn't be at meetings. I'd like be at the movies and doing things normal people do. And I was so dejected. Um, by this point, I'd gone through about 50 different sponsors because I wanted to get better. People might say, oh, she must not want to get better, but that wasn't true. I wanted to get better more than anything. My problem wasn't lack of desire. My problem was lack of power. I didn't know how to get better. Um, and that's why now sometimes if someone's struggling and they'll say, well, I guess I don't really want to get better. And I'm like, really? Then like, why are you here? And they'll say, well, I must not want to because I'm not able to put the food down. I'm like, there's a difference between wanting to and being unable to. Said, if your fairy godmother, if there was such a thing, could come and wave her magic wand and remove your food obsession right now, would you tell her to go away? Believe it or not, twice people have told me, yes, I wouldn't want her to make the food obsession go away. And to that person, I said, there's really nothing that can be done for you, right? Because page 58 gives us two requirements to work the steps. One, if you've decided you want what we have, well, if someone doesn't even want their food obsession to go away, we don't even go on to point two, which is, and are willing to go to any lengths to get it. So I was willing, but it's kind of like if someone has diabetes and they go to a doctor and the doctor says the solution is penicillin. Well, penicillin isn't the solution for diabetes. So the person may take the penicillin and say, I'm doing everything I'm told, and they're not going to get one bit better. And that was my experience. I was in what I now would call OA light, where people talked about just meetings and assignments and not that you have a spiritual illness, the solution is spiritual, and that's all we got. So I left that meeting where the next time you want to eat, just don't eat hullabaloo was going on because I'm like, well, this clearly isn't the answer. And I went to another meeting. I'd seen two girls walking together. I walked in, I sat down next to one of them, and then the other one was standing up speaking. And she, just like this, she held up a big book and she said she hadn't binged in a year. A year. Remember, I'm the girl who couldn't make it to work without binging. Like my record was 2 weeks, I think 2 weeks. A year. And she had these like beautiful blonde curls, and I was afraid to go up to her because, like, how do you go up to an angel, right? You just don't speak to an angel. But I'd seen her with a girl who just happened to be sitting next to me, and I said, do you know her? And she said, yes, she's my sister. Come on, I'll introduce you. So she introduced me to Donna, my angel, who sat down with me, who opened the big book, and she made it come alive to me. She said, go to, read the big book, the first 164 pages, the text section, because that's what the program is. And then we'll talk when you're done. I skipped the talent show, went up to my room, read those 164 pages, came back, found her the next morning. And she said, are you willing to do everything that's in this book? And I said, no. And she said, what are you not willing to do? And I said, well, there's this guy that I used to date, and I told him that I'd been raped and got pregnant, and the baby didn't know if the baby was his or the rapist and took money for an abortion. I'm not willing to make that amend. Um, because I was secretly hoping I would get him back and he'd be my boyfriend again. And she said, are you willing to believe that by the time you get to the ninth step, you'll be a different person? And that made sense to me. So I said, okay, I can do that. And thus started my journey. So she lived about an hour and a half from me. I was in New York City. She was an hour and a half away. There were meetings up there. There was like, she said there was like a whole group of them who weren't binging. I mean, to me, that was like Disney World on steroids. How could a place like that exist? And I went up there and yeah, there were like a whole group of people who weren't binging. So after a few false starts, I went up there, got abstinent for a little, then binge, then couldn't get abstinent again. And I remember actually my first meeting there, what was really cool about the meeting is they allowed questions. So it's really cool that y'all do that here. So they allowed questions. So I raised my hand and I said, I've been in the program for 6.5 years and I can't stop eating. And this crotchety old timer looked at me and said, you may have been going to meetings for 6.5 years, but you have not been in this program. And I listened and I'm like, it's right. I mean, God must have given me a minute of humility because, prideful me would have said, like, who the hell are you to tell me what to do? But I was so desperate. It's like, yes, please tell me what to do. So shortly afterwards, I was at a meeting, and again, I said, like, I can't stop. And I went up to this crotchety old timer who I knew would let me get away with nothing. And I said, will you help me? And so, of course, the question is, what are you willing to do? And I said, anything. And I remember thinking, I hope I'm not told that I have to move an hour and a half away to be close to these meetings, because if that's what I'm just going to have to do it. But I wasn't told that. But what I was told, so since my sponsor lived far away, had this idea that most people, this was the days before cell phones, most people called in their food every morning. No, not me. I got a food sponsor. My sponsor got a food sponsor who lived 10 blocks or so away from me and said every day I could not keep any food in my house except spices and maybe oil. And every day I had to go to her house every morning before work with all my food for the day and show her what I was going to eat. And I said, okay. It didn't even occur to me to say, like, are you out of your mind? I just said, okay, okay. And I did it. And I walked to her house. And you guys, like, I have a phobia of pigeons. And in early morning New York City, there are pigeons on the street. And I would just sit there and, like, say the 23rd Psalm. Though I walked through the valley of the shadow of death because I was so scary to me, but I would go to her house and I would show her my food. I would like stop at a deli on the way to like get my salad. I would go to her house, show her my food, and then it was 3 subway rides to my job. And my job at the time, it was like this social work-y job where I had to travel to clients' houses all over Manhattan. And so I had like, canned vegetables in my backpack with a can opener. It didn't even occur to me to like to protest this. I was just so grateful someone would help me. Now, was it the fact that I had no food in my house why I didn't binge? No, of course not. I lived right across the street from a bakery, right? I could have gone out at any time. But I think it was just my willingness to go to any lengths. And there's a beautiful saying I heard once that willingness allows grace to enter. Something else my sponsor told me that day is the first lie you tell, we're done. I mean, remember, I lied about everything. I made up stories. Like I didn't care about the truth. And I just said, okay, okay. And I set out to be honest. So I like guarded everything I said. If in the middle of the conversation I said something wrong, I said, wait, what I just told you, that wasn't true. And I remember my first lie, it was to my food sponsor. She asked, it was like a 1 cup container of cottage cheese, and I just taken out half of it and said it was half a cup. And she asked me if I had measured it, and I said yes. And then it was like I hadn't. And I called her back and I told her that I had lied. And I remember sitting by the phone waiting to call my sponsor, sure I was going to get dropped, but knowing like I had to be honest. So I said, I told a lie today, and I said what it was. And, I was asked, did you fix it? And I'm like, yes, I fixed it. And it was like, okay. And, and that was it. I went on with my recovery. And, some other things I did at the beginning, I gave myself an assignment to spend 45 minutes every morning with God. No one ever told me spend 30 minutes with God. I gave myself that assignment. And I said, I'm going to spend 15 minutes in spiritual reading. And I looked up the things that the founders of AA studied. And I like studied that. Um, 15 minutes in prayer and 15 minutes in meditation. I traveled an hour and a half once, I think twice a week for the most part, to go to those meetings. And I like stayed there for the weekend to be around recovery people. I really like immersed myself in recovery. And of course, I worked the steps. So again, I have 11 minutes, so I'll just kind of go through basically what I did. Again, first, I stopped being dishonest. I stopped feeling like I had any right to decide what to do about my food. And I started doing things for other people. So at the beginning, like, what could I do? Clearly, I couldn't sponsor anyone. I didn't drive, didn't have a car. I was in New York City, so couldn't get people to meetings, couldn't do anything. I did things like make sandwiches for homeless people. I just like did things for other people right away. Um, and going through the steps. So, step one, admitted we were powerless over food and our lives are unmanageable. That's kind of a hard concept because, like, what does it mean to be powerless? Obviously, like, there's not a gremlin that's taking my hand and putting into like a box, a bag, a carton of something. It's me doing it, right? But powerless means that the mechanism that keeps me from remembering that something is dangerous. Like for me, I have a really bad cat allergy. So I can't go near cats. And if someone invites me to her house, I'll ask, like, do you have a cat? And if she says yes, like my memory grabs the data points in my brain. You went near a cat, you had an asthma attack. You were near a cat, you got a sinus infection. Generates a thought that runs across the bridge to my conscious mind to say, stop, danger, cats will get you sick. That mechanism didn't work when it came to food. My memory would do its job, grab the data points. You say you're going to have one cookie, you're going to end up eating the whole box. You say you're going to have one scoop, you're going to eat the whole carton. Generates a thought to run across the bridge to my conscious mind to say, stop, danger. But the bridge was broken when it came to food. I had no effective mental defense, right? That's what our big book talks about. No mental defense against the first compulsive bite. So our big book tells us we need a different kind of defense. We need a spiritual defense from our higher power, which is God. And step two, came to believe a power greater than ourselves could restore us to sanity. Well, I had always believed in God, but now I realize like I was a practical agnostic. I believed in God, but it was totally irrelevant to my life. I didn't think about what does he want me to do. I just used him like a genie in the bottle, right? If I needed something, come out of your bottle, be my servant, then go back in your bottle and leave me alone. And I came to believe not only that God existed, but that he really cared about me personally. First, I believed that he restored other people to sanity. And then I came to believe that he could restore me personally to sanity. And usually that's a big jump, right? We believe that God can restore other people to sanity, but he won't for me. And I found that there's generally 5 reasons why people think that God won't restore them personally to sanity. The first is, I've tried this so many times and it hasn't worked. I've done some really bad things. I don't deserve it. I'm not willing to do the work. I can't remember the fifth one right now. It'll come to me in a second. So, or it's my fault. I've caused this. So to the person who says like I'm not willing to do the work, it's yeah, we're not promised we're going to be restored to sanity. To the person who says I've done some really bad things, Well, so did I. So did all the founders of this program, right? That's why there's a ninth step. We get a chance to fix it. And then our side of the street is clean. Sometimes, and I think this is the most common, it's not that I've done bad things. It's just this feeling like I am bad, this, feeling of shame, like I'm not worthy. And to that I say, I'm not worthy either. None of us are worthy. The founders of this program weren't worthy. But thankfully, worthiness isn't a requirement. It's nowhere in the big book that we have to be worthy. The only requirement is willingness to do the work. We don't have to be worthy. That's a big relief to me that I don't have to be worthy because I certainly wasn't and I still am not. Sometimes people say, well, it's my fault. I have this. And, again, the big book doesn't take any position on how we get it. Like, is selfishness and self-centeredness the root of the illness? Probably. But at some point they say, we don't know. We can't answer the riddle. But let's say I did cause it, right? And then let's say I'm walking down the street carrying my cell phone and texting while I'm walking, and I get hit by a truck and my legs get broken. When the ambulance comes, am I going to say to the ambulance driver, don't take me to the hospital. It's my fault that my legs get broken. Of course, I'm never going to do that. But when it comes to God, we get like all noble, like I have to fix myself up before I go to God. No, we don't. We really don't. And the fourth reason, which I could have used, I've tried this so many times before and it hasn't worked. Again, if I pick up my cell phone, it's like 50 times, or for 6.5 years, I try to take pictures, but I'm pushing the on off button and it doesn't work. And then someone shows me how to take pictures by pushing the correct button. If I'm willing to do it, it doesn't matter if it's my first day with a cell phone or I've been trying to take pictures for 7 years or 20 years. Suddenly I can take pictures. So I came to believe that God really could restore me to sanity. And I want to be really clear that it's God, God as we understand him. I know there's this people who say, well, your higher power can be anything as long as it's not you. Really? Like a doorknob can restore me to sanity? That makes no sense. Or even a group. I mean, you all might love me, but if lack of power is my problem, you can't give me one drop of power. All you can give me is information. And again, sometimes people say, well, what if someone can't believe in God? Can they start smaller, like with the group or, I don't know, anything, nature? It's like, no. If I go to the doctor and I have pneumonia and the doctor says to get better, you need to take penicillin. And I say, no, 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 no. I don't like swallowing pills. And the doctor says, okay, then just, rub an ointment on yourself. I'm not going to get better because the solution is penicillin. And a good doctor will say, sorry, that's all I got. And for us, all we got, all we have is these 12 beautiful steps that lead us to have a spiritual experience. So once we come to believe that God can restore us to sanity, and what generally happens is when someone starts working the steps, and then it's like they're abstinent for a day, a week, and it's like, oh goodness, like I'm not really thinking about food all that much. I'm thinking about God and, being useful to others. And I'm like, yeah, I believe God can restore me to sanity. And then and only then can a person turn their will and their lives over to God. So for me, it was like, God, you take all of me, not just my food, like how I do my taxes, how I treat people. God, you've got it all. And then steps 4 through 9 are just cleaning up our past, right? Looking at our resentments, our fears, the harms we've caused, asking God to remove our defects of character. To me, it's so beautiful. I identify my defects, share them with someone else, but He removes them because I can't. It doesn't mean we're made perfect. I don't know why He's removed some from me. So now, for instance, I cannot lie. Even when my kids were teenagers, they would know, they'd say, like, I remember my son saying once, my mom's a lot of things, but she's not a liar. So that's a good compliment from a 16-year-old. Um, and then I made my amends. I did go back to that guy who I'd, taken the money from and told all those lies to, made that amend. Strangely enough, he did not want to be my boyfriend again. I cannot understand why, but that's okay. And Now I live my life 10, 11, and 12. So step 10, I clear away the wreckage of each day. If I get a resentment, a fear, cause a harm, indulge in any of my character defects, I try and clean it up right away. Step 11, I pray and I meditate to try and get a better understanding of God, to get closer to Him. And I find that just by praying and meditating, it changes me. I just read something that, like, by praying, that's how God reorders our loves, reorders our priorities. So that um, I try to spend an hour each morning in prayer, meditation, spiritual reading. And then step 12 says, step 12, I love how it starts, right? It starts with a promise, having had a spiritual awakening as the result of these steps, a spiritual awakening or a spiritual experience. It's described on page 25. It's a full paragraph, but the last two lines are, our Creator has entered our hearts and lives in a way which is indeed miraculous. He has commenced to accomplish those things for us which we could never do for ourselves. And what's the first thing I couldn't do for myself? Like, I couldn't stop binging. And when I started working this program, like really working it, not OA light, God came in and just removed the food obsession. So, step 12, we try to carry this message, like the message in the big book, this message to other compulsive eaters and to practice these principles in all our affairs. So, I sponsor, I do workshops, I try to like carry this message that saved a wretch like me. So I can say now is I really do have a life beyond my wildest dreams. I got my two kids through the teenage years, and have good relationships with them. And I have a great sense of purpose. And I love these 12 steps. And I'm just really happy to be here. And that's all I got. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Janet. I really enjoyed listening to that. It was really lovely to hear your story, actually, having heard so many other pieces of it over the years. So we're going to transition to questions and answers. So if you have a question for Janet, please feel free to ask whatever you want within the confines of OA questions, and message them to me, and I will ask on your behalf. And I've just got one or two just to kick off, actually. The first one here is, what's your favourite line of the big book and why? You're muted, Janet. We're going to miss it.
Wait,
That's
okay. Page 55. Deep down in every man, woman, and child is the fundamental idea of God. I love that because it tells me when God created me, created all of us, He put in us like two lungs, two kidneys, one heart, one stomach, and the fundamental idea of Himself. And the next line says, it may be, I think the word is obscured by pomp, calamity, and worship of other things, but in some form or another, it is there. So that if I can't access my fundamental belief in God, there's either like calamity that I need to work through, like why did God allow this person to die of cancer, that to happen. Pomp, which is worship of myself, and worship of other things, like what my idols are. So I have to look to see what blocks me. But it's there that God loves us enough that He plants the fundamental idea of Himself in us. So that's my favorite line.
Brilliant. Thank you. So the next question I have here is, what is your most powerful relationship builder with God that keeps growing your relationship with God?
I mean, step 11, spending time with Him every day, spending time and reading things that where I mean, I read the Bible, right? And it's to get to know Him better. And there's just plenty of books that the AA founders studied. So I've studied those also. And also doing what I think He wants. So those two things, right? If I'd like just read about God but went out and robbed banks, well, that wouldn't do me very good. So I also like try and do what I think He wants me to.
Thank you very much. So the next question is, What does meditation look like for you?
So there's a pamphlet. It's called How to Listen to God. And it talks, and I often use that approach. It's the approach I like best. After I've done some spiritual reading, I get quiet with pen and my journal, and I always ask, well, yeah, generally two questions like, God, I pray for knowledge of your will for me and the power to carry it out. And how can I help the still suffering compulsive eater today? And if there's something else on my mind, I'll ask that as well. And then set a timer with some music for between 10 and 15 minutes. And I just write down what comes to me. And often, like the first things that come to me are things like, you know, laundry, blah, 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 random thoughts. And I just write down like the word laundry, and then that gets it out of my head. So once out of my head are all the Janet thoughts, there's room for if God's got anything to say to me. So I give him space if there's anything he wants to say to me.
Lovely. Thank you so much. So the next question I have here is thank you for your share and service. Has your relationship with God changed over the years?
I hope so, right? It's supposed to. It says we're supposed to grow in understanding and effectiveness. Some people blame God for the bad things in their lives. I never blamed God for it. And I hope that I've become like more obedient and more faith-filled and have just more knowledge of his character. But there's still like I feel like I'm still a beginner, that there's so much more I can learn.
Thank you so much. Yeah, absolutely. Um, so the next question I have here is some sponsors only take sponsees through the chapter working with others. Do you take your sponsees all the way through chapter A Vision for You?
So I do it little differently. I don't take them through chapters. I take them through steps. Obviously, the steps are in the chapters, but I don't like sit there and I don't do it like that. It's like first we do step one. And yes, it involves some reading selected points in selected chapters. So I take them through all 12 steps. So the ones after Two Wives, a Family Afterwards, Two Employers, and A Vision for You, and then Dr. Bob's Nightmare. I have podcasts on, so they know that if they want to hear my ramblings on those topics, they can listen. And then if they want to discuss it, I certainly will. But no, generally, I take them through 12 steps and then talk to them about sponsoring. And then they usually tell me, come back like with their first couple of sponsees. They generally have questions. And what I do with them then is I pair them up with someone else that they can do their nightly reviews with. I tell them to be in touch like a few times a week with their partner, and that I'm there for the emergencies, but they don't need me so much anymore. And then I have a meeting for my sponsees, usually once a week, like let's say 3 out of 4 weeks in a month. I'll have a meeting with my sponsees where all together we'll maybe do something out of the AA 12 and 12 or another piece of literature. Or when someone just recovers, she'll tell her story to the group because then it's like a small group of women. And this way I like keep in touch with all of them.
Brilliant. Thank you for that. So the next question is, what does balance look like for you?
So I think for me, the better question or how I would answer that is I try to do God's will. So some days it means I may have a few hours to lie on my couch and read a book. And some days it may mean, like today, I'm at two meetings. And some days, I'm like working with a bunch of people. So I think it's always just looking to see what is God's will for me. So, like when I had little kids at home, of course, like I had to spend time raising my children and, playing with my children and being with my children. So I find if I just think like, what do I think God wants me to do today, then I'm okay.
Thank you. That's lovely. So next question here is, what would you say to an atheist or agnostic that would help them have a spiritual experience? Can the 12 steps themselves be someone's higher power?
No, the 12 steps cannot be someone's higher power. If think about it, like I don't mean to be disrespectful, but like, what does that even mean? Like, how can the 12 steps be a higher power? They're just words on a piece of paper. So no, like they're instruction. So in like an instruction manual can't be God. If someone is an atheist or an agnostic, and it's very interesting because in the book it says in the second paragraph in To Agnostic says, to one who feels he's an atheist or agnostic. And Dr. Bob says, if you think you're an atheist or agnostic, and remember my favorite line, deep down in everyone, even atheists and agnostics, is the fundamental idea of God. So here's the only thing that's required for an atheist or agnostic. Are you willing to believe that maybe there's a God? And you know how they say there's no atheists in foxholes, right? They say in the big book, this illness beats us into a state of reasonableness. So it's reasonable to say, okay, maybe there's a God. And here's how I would suggest that person pray. I would suggest they say something like this: God, I don't know if you exist. And if you do exist, I don't know if you care about me. But if you do exist and you do care, I need some help. And then I would tell that person, while they're waiting for God to answer that prayer, to do everything in their power that God, if he existed, right? He may not exist, but if he existed, what would he want you to do? So we could all agree, that God would want us to help other people, right? To do self-sacrifice for the good of others. He would want us to like not tell lies. He would want like stuff like that. So we start doing the things that God, if he existed, would want. And I think God would then just prove himself. I think a prayer like that would be irresistible. But if a person said, I am not willing to entertain the idea that there's a God, I wouldn't know how to help that person.
Thank you. So the next question I have here is, could you please ask Janet how she settled into her food plan through a nutritionist? How Gracie, her sponsor, so how did that happen with the actual physicality of getting abstinent?
So I will tell you, I don't discuss my food plan with anyone, and I will tell you why. Because if I discuss my food plan, people are either going to judge me and say, well, she eats this and you're not supposed to eat this, or think, oh, she eats this and I didn't think I could, so maybe I'll be able to. So I don't discuss my food plan with anyone except my sponsors. I will tell you what I do with my sponsees, if that helps. I tell them if they come with the food plan that they got from a doctor, a nutritionist, or from like OA online, the OA pamphlet, that's great. If they don't, I can suggest a food plan. And but if she has had any kind of like bariatric surgery, I'd say you must get a food plan from a nutritionist or a doctor. I can't sponsor you like unless you have like that kind of food plan. I can't be responsible for that. So that's what I do. But I don't discuss the specifics of my food plan just because in my opinion, no good will ever come of that.
Thank you. Let me just go to the next one. What do you do with a sponsee who won't do a fourth step?
Drop her. Because the book says a person has to be willing to go to any lengths. So if someone isn't going to do a fourth step, she's not willing to go to any lengths. And I would do that with a sponsee on any step who wasn't going to do it. I would have a conversation, right, and explain that page 58 tells me I'm only allowed to sponsor people who are willing to go to any lengths. And if you're not, I'm really not allowed to sponsor you. And we hurt people if we keep sponsoring them that way. Here's why, because then they think the program doesn't work. So let's say 2 years from now, they really are desperate and willing to go to any lengths. And they'll say, oh, yeah, I tried that OA and it didn't work. So, and I don't say, go listen, go find another voice or go find another sponsor because there's nothing wrong with my voice or the way I sponsor. And so I don't want them to think, okay, well, I need a different sponsor. I just say you're not willing to go to any lengths, and therefore, according to page 58, you're not really ready to take the steps. Of course, I don't say it meanly, but it's again, if I'm a doctor and someone comes with double pneumonia and I say, you need penicillin, and they say no, I got nothing else.
Thank you. So the next question is, how long averagely does it take you to get people through the 12 steps?
6 weeks average. It could be less, it could be more, depending on the amount of the amends. Usually within 1 to 2 weeks, they're starting to work on their fourth step. And then it depends how long it takes for their fourth step, maybe a week. And then fifth step is generally, a few hours. And then it depends how many amends they have. So usually I would say it can a month or so, a month, 6 weeks-ish.
Thank you very much. So I've got another question here that says, could you ask Janet for her tips on how to connect with a higher power first thing in the mornings while looking after small children, as it can be quite challenging? Thanks.
Um, Ideally, get up before the children. And if not, if these are like small children who go to school, then just as soon as they get off to school, do your quiet time. But ideally, I mean, I had small children. I just woke up before they got up.
Thank you. And also, how do you work with your sponsees who have already been through the steps but need something new in their recovery? Do you rework the steps with them ever?
That's a good question. So it depends. So sometimes a person just, if someone's, I'm assuming if this is someone's coming to me new, they just need an Uber 10th step. It's like they've gone through the steps, but they kind of got off track. So they need to do like an Uber 10 step. So I have them do that, and then I listen to it, and that's that. If I've taken, but sometimes, again, this is someone who's coming to me fresh, and she's been through the steps, but she's just really, it just, after a couple questions, it seems she's never really been through them properly. I'll take her through them again. If I take someone through the steps and they relapse, I generally tell them, you have a day to like figure out the cause of your relapse. And I have a podcast on it. It's called Pitfalls in Recovery. So I'll make her endure the podcast, figure out where she got off track, and then together we'll come up with a plan for how to get her back on track.
Brilliant, thank you. So next question here is, thanks Janet for a great share. Can you talk more about what changed for you to fully begin working the steps after 7 years of struggling in OA?
I heard a solution. I mean, I don't think it was, I think maybe if I'd heard that solution 5 years earlier, I would have started working the steps 5 years earlier, but I didn't hear it. And that is why I am so passionate about carrying the message of the big book, because I I assume that there's other people like me who come around and they try and try, and they, have been to meetings where the message hasn't been shared. It's kind of OA light, and they haven't gotten better. So I think that's really what changed for me, is that I heard the message and I was desperate. I was just desperate. I mean, I was 23. I was cute. I was, had an apartment in New York City, and I was just like a walking zombie. I was just desperate. So when, desperation, and then heard the right information. those two things together.
Magic ingredients. Thank you so much. So next question here is, do you hear all of your sponsees' fifth steps? I
Um,
guess the context being, do you sometimes delegate? I don't know if that's the question really, but yeah, do you hear all of your sponsees' fifth steps?
yeah, the only time I didn't is when I was out of the country for a long period of time, and I had someone on a fifth step, and she was ch on a ready to do a fifth step, and she was chatting with someone, another one of my sponsees who was recovered. So I said, like, if you want to do your fifth step with her, go ahead. But no, normally, I've never like been working with someone and they said, I don't want to do my fifth step with you.
No, brilliant. Thank you.
I suppose it may happen, but it hasn't yet.
Not yet. No, good. Thank you. Um, so the next question here is, how do you help someone who suffered abuse in the name of God believe that this food program will work for them?
Okay, so when I work with someone on step two, I talk about prejudices that we have against God. The big book talks about them in We Agnostics. On page 45, it says, we have shared his honest doubt and prejudice. So people can have honest doubts and prejudice. Um, some of us have been violently anti-religion. To others, the word God brought up a particular idea of him with which someone had tried to impress them during childhood. Perhaps we rejected this particular conception because it seemed inadequate. With that rejection, we imagined we had abandoned the God idea entirely. So I would tell that just because there was like a false idea of God presented to you, right? Injuring someone, abusing someone in the name of God is horrible, and but clearly that's not God. So we have to separate the abuser, even if they did it in the name of God, from God Himself, right? I mean, I could go and I could call myself a Brit, but clearly I'm not a Brit and I don't represent anyone who lives in the UK. So, someone would have to realize, oh, yeah, Janet was saying she was British, but, and so I thought all British people said y'all. And now I realize, oh, yeah, that's wrong. British people don't talk like that. So, do you see? So it's the same concept. We have to just, all it is, we don't have to make it harder than it is. It's a prejudice, right? A prejudgment that, people of God are, this person who said they were godly was an abuser, therefore God is abusive. No, it's false. It's like Janet saying she's a Brit. No, it's false. I'm not. Brits don't talk like me. You all sound a lot better. So you see, so I would just help the person gently work through that prejudice.
Thank you. And you're very welcome to be an honorary Brit anytime you like. We like having you here.
Well, I
So,
was I was planning on coming over, but Lydia just texted me that in London y'all have like a bunch of pigeons, so I'm rethinking it.
oh no, well, we don't in Cornwall. It's all good. There are places in the UK that have pigeons. It's all good.
Okay.
So I think this is probably our last question for the evening. And it says, great to hear you, Janet, thanks so much. There's a few questions actually, but maybe just a couple of minutes on it. So some sponsorship questions. How much time do you spend taking sponsees through the steps? We've sort of had that. I'm sorry, it's just clicked off it. Where's it gone? Uh, how many do you work with in OA work at any given time, and any bottom lines for not continuing to work with a sponsee? So some of that's sort of come up already, some hasn't.
Okay. How many do I take through at a time? I have people who've like been through the steps who I'm still available to, but new people through the steps, generally three. If I do more than that, I may start like going a little crazy, maybe four max, but I usually, if like there's a fourth person, I feel like, oh, I really want to work with this person, or I really feel like I should. But usually I max it out at three, like active, in the steps, especially the early part. Bottom lines, yes. So what I generally do is I have three meetings with someone. First, an initial conversation, then I give them something to do. We discuss it, give them something else to do. We do a little work in the book. And then I tell them, okay, here are the things that I require. And I give them a night to think about it. So the things I require are, a certain amount of meetings a week and certain amount of phone calls, rigorous honesty, that they do some active self-sacrifice every day, that 30 minutes every morning in prayer, meditation, spiritual reading, and that they have a food plan that's weighed and measured and texted to me before breakfast. I say, once you're through with the 12 steps, if you don't want to turn your food over every day, that's fine. But while we're working the steps, you do it. So those are the things I require. I tell them to take a night and think about it. And if they do, then I hold them to it. I treat this like this time of working the steps like outpatient rehab. You still go to work, you still take care of your kids, but other than that, it's like an intensive immersion program in the steps. So that's why you're making phone calls, you're at meetings, and then meanwhile, I'm working with them, taking them through the steps. So they're going to be meeting with me, reading, listening to something. So it takes up a good chunk of time, but I found that seems to be the best way.
Perfect, thank you. I've got two or three more questions. I was going to, because we were sort of up to time, I was going to just maybe tentatively suggest that if you've got 10 minutes afterwards, that people could still pose those questions. But I think we will close the meeting so that people who need to get going, and obviously not making any assumptions that you've not got other commitments as well. So I'm going to just close now. Apologies if you don't get your questions asked. Thank you to everybody for coming up with such great questions. So sharing time has come to a close. Thank you so much to Janet B for your time and energy and input this evening, your service. Really have enjoyed it, and I'm sure a lot of people have got a lot from it. We will now open the chat to share our numbers for outreach. For those who would like to, please do share your name and numbers. If you are an available abstinence sponsor, please indicate that you are and that you're available to sponsor so people looking can take your number. For any newcomers, we have a newcomer hub where newcomer greeters we'll be very happy to have a more informal chat or answer any questions. To any newcomers who'd like to stay behind at the end of the meeting, please raise your virtual hand electronically when we've closed, and we will make a breakout room for people to have a chat. This group also has a WhatsApp group for fellowship and inspiration. Please see the chat box for the link and feel free to join. It's a nice active group and lots of helpful things posted there. And now we will close the meeting in the same way we always close a New Freedom Big Book study, by reading the 12 promises of recovery as laid out in the Big Book of Alcoholics Anonymous at the bottom of page 83, starting with the paragraph, "If we are painstaking," and ending, "If we work for them." Would you be happy to share those, Janet? Would you be happy to read those?
I want to let someone else read it.
Okay. Any takers? I'm just sort of.
Due to we have to stop the recording yet, so it
Okay.
has to be either
Oh,
one of
okay.
the
Well,
Oscars that
I'll do
sign
it.
off
Shall I do it
or
then? Let's do that. I see. Okay, thanks, Cara, for pointing that one out. Okay, I will read them then. So if we are painstaking, so we're on page 83 of our big book from Alcoholics Anonymous. If we are painstaking about this phase of our development, we will be amazed before we are halfway through. We are going to know a new freedom and a new happiness. We will not regret the past nor wish to shut the door on it. We will comprehend the word serenity, and we will know peace. No matter how far down the scale we have gone, we will see how our experience can benefit others. That feeling of uselessness and self-pity will disappear. We will lose interest in selfish things and gain interest in our fellows. Self-seeking will slip away. Our whole attitude and outlook upon life will change. Fear of people and of economic insecurity will leave us. We will intuitively know how to handle situations which used to baffle us. We will suddenly realize that God is doing for us what we could not do for ourselves. Are these extravagant promises? We think not. They are being fulfilled among us, sometimes quickly, sometimes slowly. They will always materialize if we work for them. So thank you for joining us today. And I was just also going to give a little bit of a mention, a shout out to Bill W. and Dr. Bob, who founded AA this time 86 years ago. I think I worked it out today. So I don't think any of us would be here, and certainly I would not be here. I would be dead without that conversation that they had together. So I'm very grateful to them and our Mother Fellowship for giving us Overeaters Anonymous as well. So thank you for joining us today. This meeting recurs on a weekly basis. We are back to studying the Big Book next week. It'll be next Wednesday at 7:30 p.m. UK time, and whatever time that is for you in whatever time zone you are. May your higher power bless you and keep you until then.